Hello and welcome to Politics here on France 24. He is back, or is he really? Nicolas Sarkozy decided to plunge back into politics this week. He ignited a flurry of speculation as to whether this was the first act of his presidential run in 2017. On Monday, the former president attended an emergency meeting of his party for the first time since 2007. The official reason was to address the party's dire financial situation after the Constitutional Council ruled that Sarkozy had overspent during his last presidential campaign. However, he also signals that politics is not over for him. With me to discuss whether Nicolas Sarkozy is coming back, and if so, if this is starting now, is Navarro-Pedro, who is the Paris correspondent of the Portuguese magazine Visao. Also on the set, Lara Marlowe, who is the Paris correspondent of the Irish Times, and with me as well, Nicolas Vinocur with the Reuters news agency. So there was a media frenzy, lots of speculation and lots of people at the UMP headquarters on Monday to see Nicolas Sarkozy make his comeback.
Pursued like a film star, greeted like a returning hero. This was Nicolas Sarkozy's first appearance at a UMP political meeting since losing the presidential election last year. The press weren't allowed in, but this footage shows the former leader addressing his old colleagues. Compelled to speak out, he said, as the party he helped create lurches between leadership and financial crises.
Should I just wash my hands of the problems that followed me? Sleeping peacefully at night with my earplugs in?
Clearly, he thinks not, although Sarkozy took to social media site Twitter to make it clear this wasn't his definitive return to politics.
This is not my political comeback. When I speak again, it will be to talk to the French about France.
So a comeback that isn't a comeback. Some aren't so convinced. Sarkozy's been widely touted to run as a presidential candidate in 2017, something he's neither confirmed nor denied. For many, it's not if, but rather when, a prospect happily anticipated by some.
He's the real president of the UMP, so really, it's like the boss is back in the house.
But a less enthusiastic response might come from Sarkozy's former Prime Minister. François Fillon's made it clear he wants to be the party's pick for a presidential bid come the next election.
Before you guys jump in, I just want to rewind a year ago, just after his defeat at the presidential election. Here's what Nicolas Sarkozy had to say to his supporters.
A new era opens here. In this new era, I'll remain one of you. Now that I'm about to become an ordinary French citizen again, I love our country more than ever. You are the eternal France. I love you. Thank you.
So at the time, many people thought Nicolas Sarkozy was kissing goodbye to French politics, but Navarro-Pedro, what we saw this week clearly indicates that it was not a bye-bye.
No, and does he know how to make an entrance? Boy, that comeback to his party was quite something to watch. It's still, obviously, he wants to come back to French politics. Obviously, he's in a very grand Gaullist position of being the what they call the recours, the providential man. Right. In French politics. But French politics are not that bad. The economic situation is not that bad for it, that puts the country in the need for a providential man. His time has gone in this country, maybe not in his party, who has all the problems between his former budget minister Copé and his former prime minister Fillon, and the party is really in very high trouble. But for this country, if you speak to people on the street, if you look at the polls for what they're worth, his time has gone by. Now, how is he going to work his way back? That will be interesting to see.
Right. Lara Marlowe, let's just rewind a little bit before what happened on Monday, just at the end of last week. The Constitutional Council, on which he sits, like all former French presidents, ruled that during his campaign he had not respected the rules, and that therefore the party was not entitled to get 11 million euros reimbursement, which puts the party in a very, very difficult situation. And Nicolas Sarkozy resigned from the Constitutional Council and said this was a threat to French democracy.
Right. Only Nicolas Sarkozy could present a defeat, and this is certainly one. He overspent actually by 1.7 million euro. He overspent by 400,000 euro, but he underdeclared by 1.7 million. So yet again, Nicolas Sarkozy has a problem with his relationship with money and how it's presented to the French people. He presented this as his triumphant return. And the emergency meeting of the UMP was called to discuss their financial crisis. The party has between 40 and something like 40 or 50 million euro in debt. Sarkozy is personally a guarantor for the 11 million. Now they've raised, I heard on the radio this morning, they've raised 4 million, but that means he's still out 7 million unless they raise it by the end of this month. So they're in a huge mess. The party's in crisis financially. It's in crisis ideologically. They don't know if they want to be allied with the National Front or not. There's one wing led by Jean-François Copé, but the leader of the party, which leans more towards the far right. And then there's François Fillon, who says, I will have nothing whatsoever to do with the National Front. And Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet, who's a rising star, also wants nothing to do with the National Front. And these are issues that they should have worked out in the years since their great defeat. And they haven't worked them out. And I don't think, I would say rather than a comeback, I don't think Sarkozy ever really left. And I think the fact that he is there hovering as the candidate in waiting for 2017 prevents the party from doing its aggiornamento. It prevents the party from renewing itself, from finding new young blood, from setting a program, and so on. Now Sarkozy says, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the droit d'inventaire, I'm going to do the assessment myself, and indeed he's promising a book. So we'll see, but I think the real question now is how the conservatives in French politics work out their differences, how they resolve this power struggle, where they go in the future. And certainly there's huge opportunity for them because President François Hollande is not popular. I think he's he's about 23% approval rating. So this should be really a sort of golden age for them if they knew how to seize the opportunity. But I think so far they're blowing it.
Right. Talking about seizing the opportunity, Nicolas Sarkozy knows how to do it. Whatever his problems, he's accusing, basically, although he hasn't spoken, he was tempted to do so apparently, but he's accusing the left and the president of a witch hunt, that they're trying to kill him politically by starting different procedures, and that Constitutional Council decision, he sees this as clear evidence that they're in after him.
Yeah, I think this has been a theme throughout Nicolas Sarkozy's term in power and afterwards, his sort of difficult relationship with the judicial branch. Him saying that indeed there's political influence behind not just the campaign finance question, but not just this one, but other issues relating to decisions he's made, a series of cases against him. He can't help himself but see this as a witch hunt, some kind of political attack against him. The question is, how much will he truly be affected by it? Can Nicolas Sarkozy be dragged before the courts like Silvio Berlusconi, which would be something that would be, I mean, a very memorable and damaging image. And the fact is that for now, he's not vulnerable. Anything that he did during his presidency is covered by presidential immunity. Notably in the Tapie case, the arbitration case that's making a lot of news in France right now.
Bernard Tapie is a controversial tycoon who was given 400 million euros in an arbitration.
Right. And for the campaign finance case, indeed, he may suffer a financial penalty for the time being, but there isn't much talk about sort of penal or criminal aspect to this case. So he is kind of safe in that regard. Yeah.
Right. But Anna, you're saying his time is gone. The polls are not necessarily saying that, and What was interesting in what he said during his off-the-record speech, which he tweeted, so probably not that off the record, is that he says, when I will speak to the French, I will let you know. And he used the future. And so this was a clear evidence that he will indeed come back.
It is. But the problem is, if you want to speak to the French first, you don't go first to Goldman Sachs, being paid by Goldman Sachs in a conference earlier in June in London, and tell them that he's the providential man for France. I mean, that really makes it a little bit awkward, doesn't it, to speak to the people, but first you speak to the bankers of Goldman Sachs. Secondly, not to forget that Goldman Sachs is the bank accused in Europe of having made up the accounts of Greece when Greece entered the euro. So if you want to come back to politics, and first he's giving his first, the scoop to Goldman Sachs is a little bit awkward, and that the French don't like it so much. As for the accounts, I don't think the witch hunt comes from, this thing with the Constitutional Court in France. I really don't believe the thing comes from the hunt, as he calls it, comes from the socialists. I'd rather more say it's the last revenge from the Chirac, people around Chirac, Jacques Chirac, his former friend and now foe. And I think it's just one last revenge coming from them. They are a majority in the Constitutional Court. So in the past, the Constitutional Court has wiped out, accounts from Balladur and Chirac himself. They were not that, they were just as bad as Sarkozys. So Sarkozy thought he'd get away with it. He didn't. And I don't think this one came from the left. And as for the rest, yes, Tapie, that's why justice, Tapie, he can't be taken accountable for the arbitration court during his ruling as a president. But that's why justice is going after the time when he was a justice minister, an interior minister in charge of police, whatever, and he was already helping Tapie to get,
There are also several other cases.
So that is why there are so many cases. The Karachi case, which is the commissions that they were paid in some arms deal, and there were people killed in this bomb blast in Karachi in Pakistan related to this corruption case. So there are many things hanging out from his career. And even if he managed to cut off all those ties, I still believe that his time as a providential man is gone unless no one emerges in France.
Right. You share that assessment. He's also indicated that, maybe he will be the only one who will be able to fight against the National Front, which has been rising in the polls in local elections. And if François Hollande remains very weak,
he has a certain nerve in promising to fight the National Front now after he tried to seduce the National Front in 2012.
It worked in 2007 when he won.
Yeah, but there's a man called Patrick Buisson, who's quite far to the right, who used to edit a magazine called Minute, who he made a special advisor in the last part of the 2012 election, and he's still seeing him, he's still in touch with him. And again, you have this blurred effect of where does Sarkozy stand. In his speech to the party on Monday, he talked a lot about Europe. Now, that was interpreted by some people as his way of distancing himself from the National Front, because the National Front is so anti-European. But, everyone always says President Hollande is so ambiguous, is the master of ambiguity. Sarkozy also can be a master of ambiguity. We'll see. The fact is he remains very, very popular in the UMP. I saw one poll that showed that 82% of UMP supporters, which is the main conservative opposition party, want him to be their candidate. The problem he will have is reconciling his popularity within the party with his unpopularity in France at large, because a majority of French people do not want him to be a candidate. And he tried to address that in his speech on Monday when he talked about unity, and he talked about rising above the party, and he even scolded his rivals within the UMP, saying, how dare you think about 2017? This is obscene when the French people are suffering. So it's okay for him to think about 2017, but it's not okay for the other candidates to think about 2017. 2017.
What seems clear is that he is not going to make a full-fledged comeback now that he's okay. He signaled that he's willing to do so, but apparently now he's going to withdraw back and wait for the next elections and then come back. So maybe he's also calculating that if he withdraws again from public life, people will miss him. And that could happen.
Sure. I mean, you could argue that the best position for him to be in is sort of out of the public eye, where people can, French people like to miss people and start liking their presidents much better once they're out of power. Jacques Chirac was very popular once he left power, and
boy, he was unpopular,
and very unpopular when he was in his role. So that could sort of be the case for Sarkozy, but I think he's just given us a bit of a reminder of his potential and his skill as a politician, and how he can take an event which is fairly ignominious in the end, that he's been forced to reimburse, and turn it into, I mean, it has been described as a triumph. I wouldn't agree with that, but certainly he's removed the focus from the deficit that he created in the party and put it squarely on his own future as a politician. And that's Sarkozy. That's still a formidable person. I would agree there is a majority that is against his coming back. This is an extremely unpopular and divisive figure during his term in power. But there are other signs that show that he's not ruled out. There are polls show that even if he is saddled with a number of legal cases, for most French people, that isn't that doesn't remove any possibility of a return for him. This is fairly common in French politics, to have a few rusty cans banging behind one. And so let's wait and see. And a lot of it will have to do with Hollande's performance in the next few years. He's still got 4 years to go in his presidency. And if he doesn't improve, he is going to create a window of opportunity for Sarkozy to return.
Okay, we'll have to keep it here because we don't have more time, but there are probably many other occasions to come to talk about Nicolas Sarkozy, who has indicated that politics is really in his blood. That's certainly something we can assess from his performance this week. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you for watching this edition of Politics here on France 24.